February 1942. The British Empire stands on the precipice of its greatest humiliation. The island of Singapore, the Gibraltar of the East, is burning. For decades, London promised Australia and New Zealand that Singapore was invincible, an impregnable fortress that would shield the Pacific from aggression. But the fortress is a lie. It is a house of cards built on colonial arrogance and a fatal misunderstanding of modern war. The tragedy begins not in Singapore, but 400 miles north on the beaches of Malaya. December 8, 1941, hours before the bombs fall on Pearl Harbor. The Imperial Japanese Army, led by Lieutenant General Tomoyuki Yamashita, lands in the monsoon rain. They are outnumbered 2-1 by the British defenders. Yet Yamashita possesses a weapon the British do not: speed. He knows that to stop is to die. He orders a relentless, driving advance south. The British command, paralyzed by orthodox thinking, believes the jungle is impenetrable. They stick to the roads, guarding the asphalt like it is gold. Because they ignore the jungle kills them. The Japanese infantry move through the impassable terrain like ghosts, flanking every British roadblock. The retreat becomes a rout. The British, Australian, and Indian troops are pushed back 500 miles in just 55 days. But Singapore still hopes for salvation from the sea. The Royal Navy dispatches Force Z, the modern battleship HMS Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser HMS Repulse. They are the iron shield of their empire. But in a war of aircraft, they are dinosaurs without air cover. December 10th. The golden thread of naval dominance snaps. Japanese torpedo bombers swarm their unguarded giants. In less than 2 hours, the pride of the Royal Navy is sent to the bottom. Churchill writes, "In all the war, I never received a more direct shock." With the Navy gone and the Air Force shattered, Singapore is naked. The impregnable fortress is now just an island trap. January 31st, 1942. The last Allied troops cross the frantic causeway connecting Malaya to Singapore. To seal the island, British engineers blow the bridge. A massive explosion tears a 70-foot gap in the concrete umbilical cord. Silence falls over the strait. The British are locked inside their fortress. But the fortress has a fatal flaw. The massive 15-inch coastal guns, the pride of their empire, are pointed south, out to sea. They were built to fight battleships, not infantry crossing from the north. It is a myth that they couldn't turn. They could. But they have no high explosive shells. They have only armor-piercing rounds, designed to punch through steel, not flesh. Across the narrow strait, General Yamashita climbs the Sultan's Tower in Johor Bahru. He surveys his prize through a telescope. He knows a secret the British do not. His army is running on fumes. He is out of ammo, out of fuel, and outnumbered 3-1. Because of this, Yamashita knows he cannot fight a siege. He must bluff. He must attack with such ferocity that the British believe he has endless reserves. Inside Singapore, the water supply becomes the ticking bomb. The reservoirs are dangerously low, and the pipelines from the mainland are cut. General Percival spreads his troops thin along the entire 30-mile coastline. He refuses to concentrate his forces, fearing a trick. He leaves the northwest sector, the most likely landing spot, guarded by the exhausted Australian 8th Division. February 8th. Night falls. The moon is hidden behind heavy monsoon clouds. The strait is pitch black. The first wave of Japanese shark troops pushes off in small assault boats. 4,000 men, silently paddling towards the Australian lines. Suddenly, the silence shatters. An Australian patrol spots the landing craft. A flare goes up, bathing the water in sickly green light. But it is too late. The Japanese wave hits the beach. they swarm through the gaps in the thin Australian line. Their impregnable fortress has been breached. The battle for Singapore has moved from the map to the streets. Morning, February 9th. The sun rises over a disaster. Australian defences in the northwest have dissolved into isolated pockets of desperate men. The mangrove swamps, which the British command dismissed as impassable, proved to be the perfect highway for the Japanese infiltration tactics. Confusion reigns supreme. Telephone wires are cut by artillery and saboteurs. Headquarters is blind, deaf, and dumb. Yet General Percival remains paralyzed by a phantom. He is convinced the main attack will come in the northeast. He refuses to send his reserves to the crumbling west. This hesitation is the death knell of Singapore. Yamashita does not wait. He pushes inland, aiming for the Tenga airfield. By noon, Tenga airfield, the shield of the island, is overrun. The Royal Air Force abandons it, flying their remaining Hurricanes to Sumatra. The sky over Singapore now belongs entirely to the rising sun. Japanese bombers operate with impunity, circling like vultures. Desperate to plug the gap, the British attempt to form a defensive line along the Jurong Ridge. It is the last natural barrier protecting the city. But the golden thread of incompetence strikes again. A misunderstood order is passed down the line. Instead of counterattack, the officers here withdraw. The Jurong line, the best hope for defense, is abandoned without a single major fight. The road to the city is now wide open. Seeing the collapse, Yamashita plays his ace card. He repairs the breached causeway and unleashes the psychological terror of the campaign, the tanks. The British propaganda had told their soldiers that tanks cannot operate in the jungle. Seeing Japanese armor on the island breaks their spirit. The target is Bukit Timah, the highest hill on the island. It holds the strategically vital supply depots and the main water reservoirs. February 11th. The battle for Bukit Timah begins. It is a savage, close-quarters brawl in the dark. Bayonets, grenades, and fists. A makeshift force called Tamforce tries to hold the hill, but they are outflanked, outgunned, and running out of time. Realizing the depots are lost, the British order a scorched earth policy. They set fire to the massive fuel reserves at Normanton. The fire is so intense, it creates its own weather system. Black, oily rain begins to fall on the city of Singapore. With the loss of Bukit Timah, the Japanese capture enough food and ammunition to sustain their offensive. Yamashita's bluff has paid off. The noose tightens around the city. The perimeter shrinks to a meager 3-mile radius around the harbor. Now the Japanese artillery moves into position on the high ground. They look down into the city like snipers in a stadium. In the north, another disaster unfolds. The Crane Road sector. The Australian 22nd Brigade is tasked with holding the coastline. But a miscommunication causes the 27th Brigade to withdraw from the Kranji area prematurely, leaving a massive gap in the line. The Japanese land unopposed. They march past their abandoned defences, shaking their heads in disbelief at the British incompetence. The golden thread of causality is now a steel cable strangling the city. Every mistake compounds the next. Panic begins to infect the civilian population. Governor Shenton Thomas orders the destruction of the city's liquor stocks to prevent rampant drunkenness by defeated troops. February 13th, Black Friday. The Japanese enter the Pasir Panjang Ridge. Standing in their way is the Malay Regiment. Led by Lieutenant Adnan Sedi, they fight like lions. Outnumbered, they resort to hand-to-hand combat when their ammo runs dry. They are wiped out almost to a man. Their sacrifice is legendary, but it buys only hours, not days. The Japanese capture the Alexandra hospital. What follows is a descent into barbarism that foreshadows their occupation. Doctors and patients are bayoneted. It is a signal that the rules of war have been left on the other side of the causeway. By February 14th, the British perimeter has shrunk to a congested parket around the city. The Japanese artillery, positioned on the captured high ground, begins a relentless bombardment. 1 million civilians, Chinese, Malays, Indians, and European refugees, are trapped in a kill zone smaller than Manhattan. There is nowhere left to run. The Japanese Air Force switches its tactics from military support to pure terror bombing. They aim to break the psychological spine of the city. Chinatown becomes a firestorm. The ancient wooden buildings burn furiously, sending a pall of acrid smoke over the entire island. The fire services are paralyzed, not because of cowardice, but because of the ultimate ticking bomb of the campaign, the water. With the reservoirs captured and the mains shattered by shelling, the city's water pressure drops to zero. Dehydration begins to stalk the population. In the overflowing hospitals, surgeons operate without water to scrub up. The stench of gangrene, blood, and unwashed bodies becomes the physical smell of defeat. Underground, in the stifling heat of the Fort Canning bunker, General Percival stares at a situation map that is almost entirely red. He receives a telegram from Winston Churchill in London. The order is pitiless. Fight to the last man. There must be no thought of saving the troops or sparing the population. Churchill demands a glorious, sacrificial Stalingrad in the tropics to save the honor of the empire. He wants martyrs, not prisoners. But Churchill is thousands of miles away. Percival is surrounded by a dying city and an army that has lost the will to fight. Discipline collapses. Deserters, armed and desperate, force their way onto the last few evacuation boats at gunpoint, pushing women and children aside. Yet across the lines, General Yamashita is also desperate. He knows a secret that Percival does not. The Japanese army has outrun its supplies. His artillery has only a few hours of shells left. If the British force a protracted street battle, Yamashita might actually lose. So, Yamashita bluffs. He drops canisters from planes, demanding immediate surrender, threatening an apocalypse if they refuse. It is a poker player going all in with an empty hand. Sunday morning, February 15th. The end game arrives. Percival calls his final commanders' conference. The mood is funereal. The municipal water engineer delivers the final blow. The city, he reports, has perhaps 24 hours of water left. After that, mass death begins. The choice is no longer military, it is moral. Does Percival obey Churchill and sacrifice 1 million civilians, or disobey him and face disgrace? Percival, a man physically and mentally broken by the campaign, makes his decision. He chooses capitulation over annihilation. At 4:00 p.m., the British guns fall silent. A strange, terrifying quiet descends over the smoking island for the first time in a week. A small party of British officers emerges from the lines on the Bukit-Timah Road. They carry a Union Jack and a white flag of truce. It is a supreme humiliation. The representatives of the empire that rules a quarter of the globe are walking to surrender to an Asian army they despised just months ago. The Japanese stop them. They are stripped of their swords and forced to wait by the roadside in the blistering sun like common prisoners. Japanese photographers are there, waiting. They capture their images that will destroy the myth of white supremacy in Asia forever. Percival is driven to the Ford Motor Factory to meet his conqueror. Yamashita is waiting, impatient and arrogant, determined to crush Percival's spirit. The meeting is short and brutal. When Percival tries to negotiate terms for his men, Yamashita slams his fist on the table. Through his interpreter, Yamashita delivers the famous ultimatum. The answer is yes or no. I want to hear nothing else. Percival, pale and shaking, bows his head. He whispers, yes. At 8:10 p.m., the document is signed. 80,000 British, Australian, and Indian troops become prisoners of war. It is the largest single capitulation in British military history. The sun sets over the Ford factory. The Gibraltar of the East has fallen in just 70 days. The long night of their occupation begins. The morning after the surrender, a silence settles over Singapore that is heavier than the noise of battle. The shooting stops, but the terror begins. The victorious Japanese army marches into the city. They do not come as liberators, but as conquerors. They parade through the streets with bayonets fixed. For the 80,000 Allied prisoners, the humiliation is immediate. They are herded like cattle to the Changi Peninsula. General Yamashita, the tiger of Malaya, is at the height of his glory. But his army is still a beast that needs to be fed, and Singapore is the meal. The occupation government, the Sionantu, Light of the South, is established. Its first order of business is not reconstruction, but purification. The Japanese secret police, the Kempeitai, set up their headquarters in the old YMCA building. It becomes a house of screams. They are obsessed with their idea that the Chinese population of Singapore is a fifth column, loyal to China and the British. On February 18th, the order is given for Suk Ching, purification through cleansing. It is a euphemism for mass murder. All Chinese men between the ages of 18 and 50 are ordered to report to screening centers across the island. They are told it is for registration. The screening is arbitrary and terrifying. A hooded informer points a finger. A man wearing glasses is deemed an intellectual. A man with rough hands is deemed a communist. Those selected for death are loaded onto trucks. They are told they are going to work details. They are driven to the beaches, Changi, Pungal, Blackangmati. At Pungal Beach, the deception ends. The men are tied together in groups of 10 with wire. They are marched to the water's edge. Machine guns open fire. The bodies fall into the surf. Those who survive the bullets are bayoneted. The Suk Ching massacre claims anywhere between 25,000 and 50,000 lives. The exact number will never be known. It is an act of calculated brutality, designed to terrorize the population into submission. It works. Singapore freezes in fear. Meanwhile, the Allied POWs in Changi prison face their own slow death. Malnutrition, dysentery, and beriberi begin to take their toll. The British officers, once the masters of the colony, are now forced to sweep the streets and bow to Japanese sentries. Yet, amidst the horror, the human spirit endures. In Changi, the prisoners organize a university, concerts, and secret radios to keep hope alive. But the Japanese have a darker purpose for these men. They are not just prisoners, they are slave labor. Thousands are shipped north to Thailand in suffocating steel boxcars. They are sent to build the death railway. Many will never return. Back in London, the fall of Singapore is a political earthquake. It signals the end of the British Empire in the East. Australia, realizing Britain can no longer protect it, turns its gaze toward a new ally, the United States. The myth of white European superiority, carefully cultivated for centuries, is shattered forever. Their Asian subjects see their colonial masters defeated and humiliated. In the occupied city, the economy collapses. Banana money, the Japanese invasion currency, becomes worthless paper. Inflation is rampant. Food is scarce. Tapioca becomes the staple diet, a symbol of the hard years. Resistance movements begin to form in the jungles of Malaya. Force 136, the MPAJA. They are funded and supplied by British submarines. Lim Bo Seng, a hero of the resistance, organizes an intelligence network. He is eventually captured and tortured by the Kempeitai, but refuses to break. Operation Jaywick. In 1943, a daring raid by Australian commandos sails a fishing boat all the way from Australia to Singapore harbour. They sink 7 Japanese ships and escape undetected. It is a sting that humiliates the Japanese command and boosts morale. But the Japanese exact a terrible revenge for the raid, torturing prisoners in Changi whom they suspect of coordinating it. By 1945, the tide of war has turned irrevocably. The light of the South is flickering out. American B-29 superfortresses appear in the skies over Singapore. The Japanese Air Force, once the terror of the Pacific, has vanished. The bombings target the naval base and the docks, reducing the port to ruin. On the ground, starvation is now acute. The population is eating tapioca roots and rats. The co-prosperity sphere has brought only poverty. Then, in August 1945, a new sun rises in the north. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The atomic age brings the war to a sudden, stunning halt. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announces the surrender. In Singapore, the Japanese garrison is stunned. They are undefeated in the field, yet they must lay down their arms. A strange interregnum follows. For 3 weeks, there is no government. The Japanese retreat to their barracks, and the British have not yet arrived. September 1945. Operation Tide Race. The Royal Navy returns. But the fleet that sails into the harbour is not the same one that left in disgrace. They are welcomed by cheering crowds, but the atmosphere is different. The blind adoration of the pre-war years is gone. The people of Singapore have seen their white masters beaten, humiliated, and imprisoned. The spell of colonial invincibility has been broken forever. General Percival, gaunt and skeletal, is released from captivity in Manchuria. He is flown to Singapore to witness the final act of the tragedy. September 12, 1945. The surrender ceremony is held at the municipal building. The roles are perfectly reversed from 1942. The Japanese commander, General Itagaki, is forced to sign the instrument of surrender. He does so under the gaze of the men he starved and tortured. In a final act of symbolism, the Japanese officers are stripped of their swords. 70,000 swords are confiscated, the soul of the samurai broken. But justice demands more than swords. The war crimes trials begin. The horrors of the Suk Ching massacre are unearthed. Witnesses recount the beach killings, the torture at the YMCA, the death marches. The city listens in horror as the full scale of the nightmare is revealed. General Yamashita, the architect of the victory, is tried in Manila. He is hanged for the atrocities committed by his troops. The Tiger of Malaya dies a criminal. For the survivors of Changi and the Death Railway, the return home is bittersweet. They carry physical and mental scars that will never heal. The physical reconstruction of Singapore begins. The rubble is cleared. The bridges are rebuilt. The economy slowly restarts. But the political reconstruction is impossible. The British Empire is bankrupt and exhausted. It can no longer hold its possessions by force. The failure to defend Singapore in 1942 becomes the catalyst for independence. The people realize that if they want security, they must provide it themselves. The impregnable fortress was a myth that cost 130,000 Allied casualties. It proved that concrete and guns are useless without leadership and will. Today, the Kranji War Memorial stands on a quiet hill. Thousands of white headstones stand in neat rows facing the causeway. It is the final resting place for the men who died defending a lost cause. The Australians, the British, the Indians, the Malays. And in the city, a simple civilian memorial towers over the skyline. 4 chopsticks, symbolizing the 4 races reaching for the sky. It honors the victims of the Suk Ching, the civilians who paid the ultimate price for the empire's failure. The Battle of Singapore was a tragedy of hubris, a lesson that complacency is the deadliest enemy of all. But from the ashes of the fortress, a new nation rose, a nation that swore never to be occupied again. The guns are silent now. The jungle has grown back over the battlefields. But the memory of 1942 remains, a scar on the soul of the Lion City. Lest we forget,